John, for a wonderful introduction. The only thing I think I would dread more, if I did dread this, than reading, would be trying to introduce my book, which I have no idea I have to do. So thank you. I really appreciate it. And while I'm thanking, let me thank William for helping to bring this book to life. It just changed everything for me in my life, and I couldn't be more grateful. And I'm just very moved to be here. I had no idea when, I was sending these pages off in the mail, going down to the post office, what even might come of it. I had no idea, so I'm just overwhelmed and very, very happy. And I also want to thank just the kind and expert, and in my case, long-suffering staff of the University of Notre Dame Press for just producing the book I dreamed about. It's just so wonderful, and I'm really, really happy to hold it. I thought publishing was about compromise, but this is just what I want. So that was very, very fine. And I want also to give a special thank you to the dedicatee of this volume, Time Speech, here known as Doug, right over here. My friend since I was, I don't know how, 5 years old, and he was too young to remember. He's like a brother, but he really is like a brother to me. And without his memories and his thoughtful talking over of places and times with me, we wouldn't have this book, or at least we wouldn't have it the way we have it now. So I'm very, very grateful and thankful. Thank you. I want to start with a hybrid form that I came up with that I call blues haiku. I want to blur from a tupelo stump like a crawfish in an endangered swamp. A purple blur from a tupelo stump, then that crawfish pinching moss off a cypress knee, so standoffish. Ground fog swirling, smelling fresh as death when the wind disturbs it. Ground fog swelling, ammonia smell, fresh as death. Somebody mopping the kitchen, or baking math. What moving violation, unpaid citation, peccadillo, drove you, bandito, from what Amarillo? What crime against nature, peccadillo, so far to the north? Oh, nine-banded tire tread, armadillo. Affiliated drummers walk. It was unignorable that was my song. The drummers low walk, walk, walk. It was unignorable, and not the sweet, sweet, sweet profanitaries warble. I might just walk barefoot down to that moody Mississippi, like a sadhu to the Ganges. Might work my feet into the mud of that mighty Mississippi, in the name of no power in the mud, but the muddy Mississippis. The towpath to the deep south, it don't feel too well, and it makes me woozy. Towpath to the river mouth, no, it don't feel too well. Laid up with a laughing gull in a brown pelican shell. Upon a mounded sand boil stared the witness tree since before the quake. On a sand boil glared the red oak hanging tree, till a mercy bolt brought it down out of its misery. couple of geezers hobbling down Cahokia Mound's interpretive walk, past a crumpled grasshopper cooking by Cahokia Mounds. Then another, no, crawfish, a great egret must have found. Down an imitative river road in the warbler-inflected breeze. Anything else? The old channel's tree line in the warbler-inflected breeze. Lemon, 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 catfish and hush puppies. One that John mentioned, Wahide, is a drainage ditch which runs straight through southeast Missouri, where I'm from, what's known as the Boot Heel. It's where I was baptized into my girlfriend's church. It has an epigraph from Heraclitus, which I translated. We do step twice into the identical river. And we don't. Yes, we are from here. And then again, we're not. Whereabouts? These are from this sequence. Nothing happens around here without us knowing about it, though we never do know what hit us. The setting's so uneventful, we just hang around it, doing nothing. We're where it takes place. It's been going around, and we catch it, the swampiest misery, an undeserving condition, a feeling poorly, a sweetness preserved, plum cheeks flat against the jar. Was it somewheres we pulled down over our heads, up over our privates, caressed our thighs with, then couldn't hardly peel off to lay back on muggy sheets our worn souls, very deeply stained within? It must have took a hold of our tongues, wrung them into an accent nobody fails to place in a soggy paperback of commonplaces whose fused pages we can't read anymore, but believe we know. A historical present we've come to expect, like the weather. It works in construction of that dream. Me, unbelievably late, darting about like a dragonfly to deliver a lecture I misplaced on a topic I know nothing about. Down branching basement corridors, bald lead pipe knees steaming, giving way to buckling tarred roof fields, chimney flues sticking up stump-like, when always I smack myself below my ear, gape at my bloodied palm. Was that a mosquito? This one's called girdled, which is something you do to a tree to kill it. The dark cypress swamp giving way to the Swampland Act of 1850, sinking to rise no more. Slatches and sand ridges quaking still, is superseded by the Little River Drainage District, a system of channels, tax and concrete setback levees, water detention basins, block holes, for catching malarial night airs. The few stubborn beaver dams, which staunched the runoff once they're dynamited clear, a rich black loam is reclaimed, unfurrowed, sown in swamp chestnut, oak, and sweet gum stumps. Cut over bald cypresses, drowned bone white, or coming back up brown kneed, lost without their deep understory, the resurrection fern, stumps thick as dragon's teeth, pumpkin ash, bur oak, shell bark hickory, possum hoss, slippery elm, a 130-foot persimmon stump, having stumped the dragline crawlers, walking draglines, steam-powered stump pullers, where migratory snakebirds fly over and cottonmouths yawn, stumps that, one dark morning, get on up and take their places back of a hickory, plow to plow, or a hoe to chop. My girlfriend lived in a place called Delmo, that's for Missouri Delta, and this poem on Jordan's stormy banks is the story of the place. It opens with an epigraph by John Hancock, who was known as the sharecropper poet. It's actually a song. Landless, landless are we, just as landless can be. On Jordan's stormy banks, cook smoke after cook smoke, cornbread and fatback, all along the roadside. Coffee, where Federal Route 60, out from Cairo, just past the turn of 1939, crosses 61 Highway up from Memphis. 100 miles of gray smoke pillars mushrooming overnight. Scarcely a car, wagon, or truck in sight. Had they picked themselves in a bulging cloud sack to be weighed at the plowed-under margin? Croppers who'd flooded the Missouri boot heel, the boll weevil, the night rider behind them, tenanted with furnish, the landlord to provide them fertilizer, seed, and work stock, tar paper cabin, markup and interest. Come the New Deal, paid not to plant, the Rarenback tells his croppers, get their parity shares in his hip pocket. But they convert that eviction into an exodus. Households heaped mile upon mile on the frozen road bank, interiors laid bare. For one wall, a dresser, partially handled, bareheaded or capped with a mirror. A corn-shuck mattress doubled over, a box spring, a coupe or a bed grill for another. Bed sheets and gray striped tablecloths knotted into swollen bundles. Thunder. Frozen rain reborn as weightless snow. Roofed with an oilcloth, blanket or quilt, or an upended table. Out front, the cook stove, an oil drum converted on which a black girl, hair scarred in what looks to be a pajama top, follows or traces a design with her finger. One stout white toddler, bare-legged in January, picks me out from the lingering onlookers at Arthur Rothstein's photographs. So does the black girl's older brother. What can we do for you? 3 black croppers in overalls and fedoras engage me directly through their picture. But a young white couple, braced for their day, can't afford me much attention. The cropper who'd show them the way to sit right tight was long in coming. 1936, oven dry dark, Mr. Drinkwater's plantation. Brother Whitfield, parched, plows on, from cane to caint, dayside to nightblind, coaxing his half-toned mule. Come on, boy, to that unpicked cotton bush, moonbone white. From out of the dark, his boy's far voice. No bread, no ham hock, no milk, no molasses neither. Whitfield pounds his knees into the furrow, offers up fistful of dust. Moonlight ignites the cotton bush. All my life I go by your book, the Lord to reward his servants. The good bush blazes back. I give you crops to fill your barns, but you let somebody lock them away, leave you the bone without the wish. Brother Whitfield, dust off his soul, comes to his feet, Southern tenant farmers union men. And Moses gets them to the Red Sea, and they make camp there. Here come old boss pharaohs riding bosses in their chariots. It's history repeating itself in 1939. Not to be lynched, Brother Whitfield waits out of harm's way while croppers sing. On Jordan's stormy banks I stand and cast a wishful eye. Jesus is my captain, I shall not be moved. Plagued with exploding flashbulbs, the landlords await the Red Cross. Who tells them they'll send no aid that might muddy the waters of the Missouri state? Suffering from this self-imposed health menace, this unprecedented traffic hazard. Hardened, the Rarenbacks dump these unsightly subjects out of focus into the spillway. Mississippi bottomland between two levees those same croppers had raised. Homeless junction, land of iced ditch water to drink, nothing to eat, no one to see. Too late. The post is dispatched. The herald sounds. The march of time, too real, tramps into movie houses. Eleanor writes them into her column. Franklin sees it wasn't good. Lets there be 10 Delmo labor villages. Homes turned into segregated circles. Water running hot and cold. Electrical power, storage and garden, whatever it was they missed. Poverty grinding between gears like a newfangled tractor, as promised. We couldn't have a poem on baptism without the actual baptism, which is this poem, Castor Glands. Brother Paschal, feet planted in Wahite, where bright angel feet have trod, with the authority given to him from Delmo Baptist Church by Jesus Christ, tilting John back with one hand under his backbone into the water, pinching the other over his mouth and nose, John musing on Sherry Kay's Pudendo. How else to explain what I see next? Watches as a veering brown current, sleek and nippy as any from Castor River, firms and fattens into a yearling beaver that dips and swirls up before John's face and shows its incisors, enraptured it seems to have found him or caught him, as Castor at last is pollux, before it dives over, that is, under John's startled head, making as if to bite off his shrunken scrotum for its sharp and leathery perfumed castoreum. John groping for the belt loops of his dress pants, had he worn them, when up bobs the singing embankment, Brother Paschal grinning at him, "You're saved!" One I like to read called Twice, a version of the resurrection. What makes me think there's anything here anymore I could raise up writhing out of this drowned river? I might as well try catching 2 fish off the same worm. Big Lionel swears you can. He's living with cancer now in an assisted living facility where he's begun, now and then, to recollect the same thing twice. He used to get the horse weeds round the side of the road, and he'd stop and find the weeds with the knots in them, slice off 7-inch sticks and throw them in the bottom of the boat, and that'd be his bait. He'd split a stick end to end, and the little horseweed would be laying there feeding on the marrow of the wood. He'd take the worm out, put it on a small hook. He'd have a split-shot sinker with a small floater, and he'd put it out on along about a 14-foot pole and a 14-foot line on it, and he'd just dabble it around bald cypress logs and down into hollow cypress stumps alive with fish and likely spots that a fish might be in the creek. And when they hit it, he'd just jerk a little and he'd get his fish caught, which he caught a lot of bluegill. Mostly bluegill, but also goggle-eyed. Red ear, which is also called a shell cracker. It feeds on snails on the bottom of the creek, and a crappie now and then, and he'd catch a bass occasionally, and occasionally he'd catch a catfish, though he'd been fishing for bluegill, like he says, with about a 14-foot pole, and he had about 14 foot of line on it, where he could toss it out round to likely spots where a fish might be, and when they hit it, his little floater go under and he'd jerk and catch his fish. Now, a cricket is soft, and by the time a fish catches that, he actually grabs it in his mouth and he tears it up. But a horseweed is tough, and he stays on. And you can catch half a dozen fish sometime, and the fish would still be hitting at this brown and yellow skin hanging on the hook, which he caught a lot of bluegill. And in the name of Castor River, Little River Drainage District, Wallhite Drainage Ditch, and in the name block letter on the long gone railroad station's long gone sign, W.A. Height, I put out this poem on about a 4 to 5 foot line, and in the name of John, I dabble it about bald cypress stumps and likely spots, and I keep my keyboard running, and my eyes on the floater. The panorama was a very long painting that was set up on vertical rollers, and as it was rolled and unrolled, became the very popular forerunner to the motion picture. It was the first motion picture in America and England, and especially the traveling panoramas were extremely popular. None more so than John Vanguard's, which I'm going to tell you about in this poem. This poem formally was fun for me because it's all titled. There's actually no poem. It's just a title, and there's a little bit of self-parody perhaps in this poem. We've lost all these panoramas from Vanguard. Vanguard's 3-mile moving Mississippi panorama will, thanks to a pair of bevel-geared cranks in a row of suspended pulleys, unreeling the mighty canvas from one upright roller onto another, transport you, seated, hands on knees, before the darkened proscenium, to its waking dream of pecan trees, festooned with the muscadine vine, where along the way you will be ambushed off Plum Point by Merle's river pirates, astonished by slaves cross-sectioning an aboriginal burial mound, amazed by such effects done up brown in the dioramic line, as the New Madrid quake liquidating its banks, a gaslight moon paddling the rumpled canvas with arching brushstrokes, and the Crescent City's carnival flambeaus succumbing to ashes. This most mammoth pictorial voyage, praised alike by the poet of Evangeline and the author of Household Words, carrying Windsor Castle's distinguished mark of royal approbation, will cover in under 2 hours 1,200 miles of river with 700 gallons of paint, casting certain foreign writers who scoff that America has no art commensurate with its size, face down into consternation. This evening's river, narrated by none other than that sketcher of the lonesome skiff, John Banvard. His poetry and pattern diversified by Madame Chuisseau on her pianoforte will commence once the night swells. Unfasten his flatboat from Mastodon Bone Bar, upon which it has unaccountably snagged, as your captain and artist, John Banvard, serenely and hourly expects they will. Shuffle first saw life outside my notebooks and keyboard in Notre Dame Review, and that started me off towards Times Beach, the book, so I'm so happy. Shuffle is about the New Madrid earthquake, which some of you may have heard of. It's one of the largest in American history. And New Madrid, Missouri is my home county. The first poem is called The Great Comet of 1811, which came slightly before the earthquake. The sequence settles uneasily upon a coincidence. The 1811 earthquake along the New Madrid Fault, one of a series of winter shakes that flattened and drowned woods in warm water up to a horse's belly, and thrust swamps up to steam their last steam, coincided with the first steamboat voyage on western waters, an ideal painted on the Pittsburgh steamer's hull, New Orleans. Unmuddied, a coincidence converges from nowhere, making no sense. Yet, when we cast our lots somewhere, we live in the midst of such occurrences, odd only at first, and we dwell on them, turning them over in our hands and making something of them, though some of us remain in the dark. No fizzling star, the great comet of 1811, with its moon-sized coma and its panther-length tail, wheeling across the fall and winter and next year's spring night skies, was read as a portent of wars and disasters, and was parodied as a portent almost as often as it was witnessed. It appeared to William Blake to betoken the immortal luck of even the tiniest spirit depicted in The Ghost of a Flea. To Pierre, love-drunk in his black bearskin cloak at the entrance of Arbat Square, and, as it happened, Book 9 of War and Peace. It shone like a flaming arrow of Eros, lodged in the heavens and in his heart, though Napoleon, fording the Niemen, took it as a blessed ill omen of Moscow in flames. To the Tuckabachi Creeks, it appeared to magnify the name of the visiting Shawnee rebel, Tecumseh, Leaping Star. But to George, a Kentucky slave on an errand, it must have been up to no good. While to the designer and pilot, Nicholas Roosevelt, it probably meant no more than nature's parting shot across the bow, twilighting his steam-powered deck. This is about Roosevelt, the boy. It's in the genre, I guess I should mention, it's in the genre of the Aesopian fable. And if you go back to those, one thing I like is that it's not only animals talking, but often inanimate objects take character parts. So this is called The Boy in the Mill. Why do you churn the water so, unevening the creek? Little Nicholas called out, throwing up 9 of her 18 hands. Flora, the red flour mill across the stream, glared back, determined to deal handily with this impertinent child lounging on the opposite dock. The word you want is roiling. In any case, it's the stream turning me, not me, the stream. It's getting dark. My mistake, shouted the boy, hurrying away through the reddening sugar maples. Before long, across the creek, named by a happy coincidence Aesopus, the Muncie, Sopus, meaning brook, merging in the Dutch ear, as luck would have it, with the Greek fabulous, he reappeared. Under his arm was an odd contraption, looking to Flora like a crude replica of herself, pierced with a mud-stained axle tree, at either end of which was a red wheel that happened to bristle with 18 cedar shingle paddles, its axle sprung with whalebone and hickory wood. One wheel pressed against his stomach, the boy started winding the other. When he set the tiny millboat loose in the water, it floated briskly over to its appalled prototype, bumping one of Flora's paddles with a pluck. But old Aesopus soon unruffled her. Roil all you like, the die is cast. My parents happened to meet on a St. Louis streetcar, which helps account for me and mine. The odds against us. Then again, maybe so. What if he'd landed the job? The stars would wink back. She'd have been working late, would, if in luck, have boarded the block before. Her fingers stained with streaming hand-colored sunsets, 10 cents a card, fireflies, blue moon, almost at cost. The night's last streetcar must have crackled to a halt. Olive Street, 1941. On deck, no seat. Then he lit on hers. But would he feel odd? He needed a smoke because he wanted her number. But would he be given the nod? No odds are even. And what about us? Were we coaxed from afar? We'll never know better. Or were we a coincidence, waiting to concur? What if the twilight had failed her? Her haunting cards might well have been blurred and blackened. They'd ride lost in second thoughts. His son of a bitchin' job had got away. She'd cut a deal about her age and worked for nothing. 100 mud-pied sunsets. But wait, she wouldn't have known that yet. So what if he hadn't happened to have had a pencil? She wouldn't have minded. The hand against any two things coinciding is high. But luck is fibrous, nebular, overriding, and readiest when the stellar core fails. She'd reach inside her purse, pull out her lipstick, hand paint her number all the way up his sleeve. The whole car had to have laughed. His starched and flattened arrow shirt, her piecework red. And it did happen. It happened that way. You would call that number. George is the young man who was owned by the nephews of Thomas Jefferson. He's fetching water in this poem with an ancestral Wedgwood pitcher. This is called Rocky Hill Spring. Mud is the spit of the Lord. These words, or their like, wheel about the head bone of George, the decaying Lewis family's ill-thrived errand boy. On that head bone rode Mother Jefferson's picture on which Aquarius had cast his silhouette in a darker blue. Pure coincidence, George would make it seem, when he'd wander back a good deal later or earlier than looked for, with cinchona bark where the ague shakes, or a storied pitcherful of water sprung from Rocky Hill for dinner. Errands that happened never to fulfill Wilburn's or his near-term Letitia's glaring dictates even halfway. This December night, George ambled his odd amble up the steep north slope, meticulous to a fault, the perching frost packed at each of his tips and orifices, as in a Kentucky bottom's noonday steam, a carmine and lemon-streaked emerald blanket of Carolina parakeet that crack and discard each burr of a cocklebird field, its fruit dug out and consumed. Nero, the famished black househound, loped on ahead of him. George, too, independent-headed, going on 18, lashed of late for his skulking spell. The border patrollers diverted by Chickasaws down to the mudflats, canebrake mosaic, sun-baked tiles so insolently curled. He'd fished the night on an Ohio sandbar, bar so shallow a body might fish itself across, from a bound shore to an unbound. Crouched tonight by the spring on an egg-shaped rock, George took a long, cool think. He spat, and Nero lapped it up. Then he leaned down and scooped out a handsome shard of Wedgwood. We're out of time, so let me thank you all very much, and for listening.